Francis Hutro Navarre, a French fur trader on the Great Lakes frontier from 1780 to 1840. This presentation was held at the River Raisin National Battlefield Park in Monroe, Michigan on June 11, 2017 at 2 p.m. Navarre was born in 1759 and died sometime after 1840 and was baptized Francois-Marie Navarre. His sobriquet or nickname given to him by Native Americans of the period was Hutro, with many spelling variations but meaning unknown. He was one of the most dangerous men on the frontier during this period. A descendant of a royal French family of Detroit, he knew as much about Indian culture and lifeways as the Indians themselves. A partial genealogy shows some interesting relatives. His parents were Robert Navarre, born 1709, died 1791, a royal French notary and subdelegate of the Intendant of New France from 1734 to 1760, and Marie Lothman de Barras, born 1717 and died 1799. Robert Navarre was a descendant of the agricultural aristocracy of the modern department of Seine-et-Marne, who was educated in Paris, France. He was responsible for collecting taxes levied by the intendant. The office was primarily judicial, which empowered him to deal with personal and property matters and a selection of guardians at Detroit. Hutro's older sister, Marie-Françoise Navarre, born 1735, died 1795, married Lieutenant George McDougall Sr., born 1746 and died 1780, of the British Army stationed at Detroit. Her second husband was James Campeau, born 1735, died 1789, of one of the wealthiest French families of Detroit. Marie-Françoise and George McDougall Sr.'s children were Jean-Robert McDougall and George McDougall Jr., born 1766 and died 1842. George Jr. never married and was considered eccentric and hot-headed, who lived an abominable life among the Wyandot Indians at Sandusky in 1795. He and cousin Francois-Marie Navarre de Teachagoy, that is Colonel Francois Navarre, founder of Monroe, Michigan, a nephew of Francis Hutro Navarre, were instigators of plots to murder Father Edmund Burke, born 1753, died 1820, the pastor of St. Antoine Parish on the River Raisin, and a British agent, and Captain George Wellbank, sometimes called Welland, at Sandusky. The Navarre-Williams family genealogy papers at the Kennedy Center for Special Collections, Carlson Library, University of Toledo, Ohio, also shows the Denison entry of Marie Louise Godard de Marentet, Hutro's wife. But there are some problems with this when one looks at the memoirs of Peter Navarre, the son of Hutro and Marie Louise. Denis Au, French colonial historian, stated the entry about Hutro Navarre in Reverend Christian Denison's Genealogies of the French Families of the Detroit River Region, 1701 to 1936, is not correct. Denison stated that Hutro's wife was the daughter of René Godet de Marentet and Catherine Campeau. However, Denison could not connect the René to the Godet de Marentet family of the Detroit River region. He lists René separately and simply lists him as René Godet and does not include the sobriquet Marentet. The records of St. Francois Xavier Parish in Vincennes, Indiana, includes a René Godard de Panat, who is married to a Catherine Campeau. They had a daughter named Marie Louise. Denis Au felt that the name Panat we find in Pierre Navarre's memoirs, son of Hutro Navarre, at the Toledo-Lucas County Public Library could very well be Pana. He seems to remember that in the memoir, Pierre mentioned that his mother was from Vincennes. Dennison did not have access to the Vincennes records. Of course, the last word will be the actual marriage contract record of Hutro and Marie Louise at St. Anne's Parish in Detroit. Marshall Lloyd Davies, a descendant of the Navarre family, shows that Hilary Diane Rodham, who married William Jefferson Clinton in Fayetteville, Arkansas, is a Navarre descendant of the Marie Francoise and George McDougal Sr. lineage. Perhaps Hilary gets her eccentric behavior and hot-headed temper from George McDougal Jr. In 1792, Hutro's elderly mother, Madame Marie-Françoise Southmont Barras, living in Detroit, was in poor health and in need of assistance. She engaged Hutro and wife Marie Godert to provide her and her servants with certain necessities, obligating Hutro and Marie Louise through written contract in exchange for her real estate and property upon her death. What would Hutro and Marie Godert receive? A tract of land, 1.5 by 40 arpents, on the Detroit River with a house, all buildings, fruit trees, furniture, and agricultural implements. What would Hutro and Marie Godert furnish? Every year, they would deliver to his mother storage area the following items: 1,500 pounds of good flour, 100 pounds of good salt pork in a salting tub, 150 pounds of fresh beef, 1.5 bushels of salt, 2 pounds of pepper, and 12 cords of good wood to be delivered 4 times during the year, 1/4 of the whole every 3 months on the same date. What were additional requirements furnished by Hutro and Marie Godert? 2 complete sets of clothes, 4 fine shirts, 3 pairs of French shoes, hair dressings, kerchiefs, 12 gallons of good rum, 12 gallons of good wine, 15 pounds of coffee, 5 quarts of sugar, 10 pounds of New York currency upon her demand, and to take care of her in case of illness, to include supplying a doctor. What was required upon the death of Madame Barras in 1799? To be honorably buried with a high mass sung for her on the anniversary of her death, another high mass, and 12 low masses said for the repose of her soul. The contract bears the marks of Madame Barras, Francois Navarre, and Marie Godert Navarre, testifying that they were illiterate. The document was witnessed by J.S. Cabassis and Louis Dassine and Francis Pepin. This partial map of the original landowners along the River Raisin, now Monroe, Michigan, by Raymond M. Duchesne, April 2012. The original map that this was based on was made by Aaron Greeley in 1810. Greeley was charged to do land surveys of land tracts approved by the Detroit Land Board between 1805 and 1809. The River Raisin settlement grew rapidly between 1779 and 1788. The first to secure land there was Jean-Baptiste Romain de Saint-Scrant, the Fearless, who obtained land in May of 1779, followed by Joseph Porlier de Benac, who settled on Riviere au Sable, Sandy Creek, in 1780. Francois Pepin, George McDougal Jr., Gabriel Godfrey Sr., and Detroit merchants George Meldrum and William Park obtained land on Riviere au Roche, Stony Creek in 1786 and 1788. On June 11, 1783, Francis Hutro Navarre and brother Robert Navarre de Tonton negotiated a deed for land known as Certificate Number 53, here outlined in red on the map, from Chief Shahorenabai, a Potawatomi on the north side of the River Raisin, measuring 8 arpents in width, intended to be used for a house of prayer or worship for the Master of Life. The deed is recorded in the Wayne County, Michigan Deed Book, Volume 1, page 68, Detroit, Michigan. Hutro and Tonton were among the first white landowners on the River Raisin. The Navarre-Anderson Trade House, erected in 1789, as sworn by Joseph Jobin, captain of the River Raisin Militia, in 1808 at the Detroit Land Board hearings for award of title, deed, and survey. Family obligations, particularly a contract agreement with Hutro's widowed mother, prevented him from bringing his family to the River Raisin until 1797. The trade house was renovated with 2 or more windows cut in, another door and 2 rooms partitions added, and plaster applied to the walls. For the next 5 years, Hutro, wife, and 9 children resided in the trade house and the River Raisin community. John Anderson was a fur trader at the Maumee Rapids from 1795 to 1802, working with partner John Askin Sr. of Detroit. Trade became too volatile and unprofitable with fluctuating prices with the Indians due to George McDougall Jr. and Ronald McDonald carrying on a cutthroat trade at Fort Defiance. In 1802, Anderson moved to the River Raisin after accumulating a handsome property. Hutro sold the trade house and property to Anderson. In 1804, Anderson built a bigger and more spacious trade house and sold the old trade house and property it sits on to someone else. Presqu'île was a mixed Odawa and French village at the mouth of the Maumee River with Lake Erie from 1790 to 1839. Private Claim 233 began with Martin Nadeau of Frenchtown, who lived on the tract from 1793 to 1797. In 1796, a man named Conson and Pierre Lagauthier lived on part of the tract. On December 30th, 1796, Joseph Riom, a French-speaking Canadian, occupied the tract, then sold it to John Askin Sr., a wealthy merchant of Detroit. In 1802, Francis Eutrope Navarre, who is actually Francis Hutro Navarre, occupied part of the tract until 1821. On December 29, 1804, Martin Nadeau filed a claim of 720 French acres, that is 6 by 120 arpents, with the Detroit Land Board, which was suspended for more witnesses. In 1813, Joseph Riom testified that Francis Eutrope Navarre built a house, now old and rotten, and lived there until 1821. Martin Nadeau's claim to the tract filed in 1821 was rejected by the Detroit Land Commissioners. On December 12, 1833, Martin Nadeau filed a grievance claim with the Senate of the United States through Secretary of War Lewis Cass for remuneration of loss of the land tract. Nadeau's petition to the U.S. Senate states that in 1795, Nadeau was given a deed by the chiefs of the Odawa Indians of the Maumee River to a tract of land 4 by 120 French arpents at the mouth of the Maumee River on Lake Erie on the south side. The deed was recorded in the office of Peter Audrain at Detroit and surveyed by Porlier Baynac on May 15, 1795. The gift of land was given as remuneration by the chiefs who demanded Nadeau provide for an Indian widow and 3 small children, which he did for 7 months, allowing their board at 25 cents per day each, for a total of $101.25. Nadeau cleared 20 acres, all under fence, built a house worth $50, a barn worth $25, and had possession for 4 years until 1799. Urgent business called Nadeau to the river Raisin, so he locked the door, left some household furniture, and went to Detroit to record his deed in due time. Some time after, a certain family named Hutro Navarre, that is Francis Hutro Navarre, occupied Nadeau's house and property. Mr. George McDougall, Jr., an assistant or a clerk to the Detroit Land Commissioners and a cousin-in-law of Hutro Navarre, induced the commissioners to reject Nadeau's claim and thereby deprived him of the equity in which people live off their lands. Nadeau wrote a petition to the Senate asking for remuneration of his stolen land and buildings on December 12, 1833. He stated that Mr. Walcott Lawrence, a lawyer, took his case that justice should be done. Walcott put off the matter from day to day at length and acknowledged Nadeau's deed was lost, and at another time Lawrence Walcott told one of Nadeau's sons that he had forwarded the deed to New York. Nadeau stated they all so well succeeded in their scheme that redress has been out of my hands to obtain. The governor of the Michigan Territory, before the War of 1812, had honored Nadeau with 2 commissions in the militia as an ensign, and who fought for General James Winchester at his defeat at the battles of the River Raisin in January 1813 that allowed the Indians to plunder his house and property. This is a photograph of Peter Navarre, born 1790, died 1874, son of Hutro and Marie Louise Navarre, circa 1866 in Monroe, Michigan, who posed for a photo of his dress he wore during the War of 1812. One item is not authentic in the photo. The half-axe replaced the tomahawk because one could not be found. Peter Navarre was one of 30-some soldiers who escaped the battles of the River Raisin on January 22, 1813. He traveled some 48 miles in the snow on foot to the Maumee River Rapids. The battles and massacre at the River Raisin between January 18th and the 23rd of 1813 resulted in the evacuation of Presqu'île, the mixed French and Ottawa community at the mouth of the Maumee River, Lake Erie. Major General William H. Harrison lost the left wing of his U.S. Northwest Army under Brigadier General James Winchester's Kentucky Brigade, who disobeyed orders not to move to Frenchtown on the River Raisin. U.S. losses were 522 captured, 148 killed and missing, 65 wounded, and 33 escaped. In 1808, the village was situated on a grassy plat that contained some 60 log houses, that is, cabins, hewed and whitewashed, laid out in 2 rows, which presented a cheerful and pleasant appearance, according to Peter Navarre. Shortly after the American disaster at the River Raisin, some 20 French families at Presqu'île packed their belongings and formed a train of horse sleighs with wooden runners, sleds, and some wagons, and headed for Fort Stephenson on the lower Sandusky River, some 30 to 35 miles away. The party was led by Pierre Malache, a French trader and an American Army scout who knew the Sandusky River territory well. He was a member of the Jean-Baptiste Malache, born 1741, died 1820 family of Detroit and Sandwich, now Windsor, Canada. While Hutro and his family joined the French party to lower Sandusky, his sons Peter, Robert, James, and Alexis had already joined Winchester's Kentucky Brigade as spies, that is, scouts. The 2-mile square reserve, located on both sides of the Sandusky River at the rapids and now within the city limits of Fremont, Ohio, was a strategic location reserved to the United States at the Treaty of Greenville in 1795. The route the French train took from Presqu'Isle to Fort Stephenson at Lower Sandusky, Ohio, in late January and early February 1813. There were horse sleighs with wooden runners, sleds, and some wagons that traveled over ice and snow-covered hard ground. The first day the train made Locust Point. The second day they arrived at the Portage River near Port Clinton, Ohio today, with exhausted horses. The third day they crossed Sandusky Bay, entering the Sandusky River. At Muskellunge Creek, the French party received fresh horses. By the end of the day, they had reached the Sandusky Rapids and Fort Stephenson. Francis Hutro Navarre emerges from the shadows to save Fort Stephenson. It began with the murder of the Gear family. On June 29th or 30th, 1813, an Indian war party from Fort Malden, Canada, traveled by birch bark canoe along the shore of Lake Erie to Lower Sandusky, now Fremont, Ohio. The war party attempted to gather intelligence on Fort Stephenson for the British and searched the woods for isolated farm families to kill. George Shannon and a man named Pomeroy were working on the flats below Fort Stephenson gathering vegetables. Isaac Feudy kept guard as a lookout for Indians. The work party was startled when they heard the crack of 2 rifle shots fired almost as one by Indians, which wounded Shannon and Pomeroy. Feudy returned fire as the 3 ran for cover on the Sandusky riverbank. The Indians then proceeded to the house of the Gear family, consisting of an elderly father and mother and a son and daughter. On hearing the alarm, the son and daughter ran into the cornfield nearby to hide out. They were met and killed by the Indians. The Indians then followed the father and mother to the river and killed them just as they were getting into a small boat to escape crossing over the river. Hutro Navarre, on hearing the first shot by the Indians, scaled the fort's pickets and with rifle in hand ran down the river towards the trouble. He discovered 2 Indians chasing an Ohio militia soldier who was running for the fort. Hutro fired, killing the closest Indian, then squatted out of sight in the brush, reloaded, and popped up in a different location and shot the other Indian. Upon returning to the fort, Hutro told the Ohio militia detachment and other spectators that if they sent a detachment downriver, they would not find the Indians. Instead, they would find the packs of the Indians with his rifle balls in them. Navarre shot them in such a manner that the musket balls passed through their breasts and lodged in the blankets carried in their backpacks. This served as a warning to other hostile Native Americans that Hutro Navarre was in the area and that they should be on their guard. Hutro also told them that they would find the farm family dead and scalped, with 2 militia soldiers, Feudy and Pomeroy, dead and scalped, hiding in the brush in the riverbank. Shannon was the only one to survive. Albert Cavalier de Rangard learned these details listening to the men and women talking about the incident at the fort, which made an indelible impression upon him that he would never forget. Albert R. Cavalier de Rangard, born 1806 and died 1895. Parents were Joseph Cavalier de Rangard, born 1782 and died 1813, and Marie Louise de Mars, born about 1785 and died 1813 at Fort Stephenson. They were buried in the ground known today as the French Burial Grounds down the hill from Fort Stephenson. Albert's recollections of the Indian hostilities in Hutro Navarre in June of 1813 adds amazing details not found in Major General William H. Harrison's letter to British General Vincent in November 1813. This cartoon, titled "A Scene on the Frontiers as Practiced by the Humane British and Their Worthy Allies," by William Charles, 1812, located in the Library of Congress of the United States. This political cartoon from the War of 1812 attacks the British policy of paying bounties to Indian allies for enemy scalps. General Henry Hamilton, the governor and British commander at Detroit during the American Revolution, was the most infamous practitioner of this policy, earning him the nickname the Hair Buyer on the Pennsylvania frontier. The United States of America versus Francis Hutro Navarre in 1820. In 1823, there were 6 separate heads of family named Navarre living in Monroe who were related to Hutro. The 1830 federal census shows Hutro was head of a household consisting of a wife, 70 to 80 years of age, and 4 males living at the mouth of the Maumee River, then considered part of Monroe County, Michigan. Isaac P. Skinner, born 1796 and died 1838, married Amanda Elford, born 1796, died 1863, and worked as a deputy sheriff starting in 1817, a school teacher, a commissioner of Monroe County School Board in 1834, and registrar of deeds living in Monroe, Michigan. Together they had 4 sons and 2 daughters. On May 25, 1820, Deputy Sheriff Isaac P. Skinner saddled his horse early Thursday morning in Monroe in preparation for a trip to Presqu'île, some 35 miles south of the Maumee, at the mouth of the Maumee River. Robert Touton Navarre, at the time living with Hutro's nephew, Colonel Francis Navarre, in Monroe, was involved in an assault and battery of Joseph Chamberlain, an English-speaking gentleman. Obviously, Robert fled Monroe for the safety of the mixed Odawa and French village of Presqu'île and the protection of his father Hutro. Skinner's route probably took him south along the old road leading from Detroit through Frenchtown to the Maumee Rapids. He probably crossed at the Maumee Rapids, where it was fordable, there not being a ferry or bridge at the mouth of the Maumee River. The 1817 map of Hall's Road, surveyed by John Anderson, topographical engineer, shows the Maumee and Perrysburg settlements. At Presqu'île, Skinner went to Hutro Navarre's house to inquire about his son, Robert Touton Navarre. It is not clear from the case file if Skinner had a warrant for Robert's arrest, announced his entry into Hutro's cabin, or asked for permission to enter, but Skinner did enter the house. Skinner, a 24-year-old virile deputy sheriff, was not met by Robert Navarre, but by an angry and hostile 61-year-old Hutro Navarre, who delivered a severe blow to Skinner with a wooden club, screaming, "Damned rascal." Hutro continued to shout at Skinner that if he did not leave his house, he would kill him. All of this happened before Skinner could utter a single word. Skinner stumbled backwards outside the cabin door onto the ground. Hutro followed, dropping the club and picking up a tomahawk on his way out the door to finish the job on Skinner. Skinner was assaulted by several more blows with the tomahawk by Navarre, who cut, maimed, and beat Skinner almost to death. According to Skinner, it was only by the grace of God that one of Hutro's sons grabbed Hutro and restrained him from committing murder. Though not mentioned, it probably was Robert Navarre. Skinner was left lying on the ground for a long period of time without help before regaining some stamina to travel back to Monroe. He spent the next 2 months in bed recovering from his wounds. The case, the United States of America versus Francis Hutro Navarre, dated September 9, 1820, is in Box 29, Folder 28, Monroe County Court Case Files, dating 1818 to 1848, numbers 1 through 74, and legal documents dating 1819 to 1872, numbers 1 through 130. The Michigan Supreme Court records, 1796 to 1857, stored at the Archives of Michigan, Michigan Historical Center, Michigan Department of Natural Resources in Lansing. The case file contains the following documents: complaint of assault and battery filed by Isaac P. Skinner on July 7, 1820, in Port Lawrence, now Toledo, Ohio, with Benjamin F. Stickney, born 1773, died 1852, Justice of the Peace. A warrant for arrest was issued by Stickney the same day to Sheriff Herman Brown for the arrest of Hutro, Navarre. Brown arrested Navarre on July 8, 1820, and transported him to Monroe, Michigan, where he was jailed. Arraignment of Francis Hutro Navarre on July 20, 1820. Hutro was brought before Laurent de Rocheur, born 1788, died 1861, acting Justice of the Peace for arraignment. Skinner's complaint was read to Navarre in English with a French translation read by Colonel Francis Navarre, Hutro's nephew. Hutro made no defense against the complaint and said nothing to rebut Skinner's complaint. De Rocheur ruled that Hutro be bound over to appear before the next county court session, which was the first Monday in September of 1820, and post bond to ensure his appearance. Colonel Francis Navarre provided collateral for Hutro's bond, which amounted to $500. On September 9, 1820, the case went to the grand jury with Charles J. Landman as prosecuting attorney, Judge Laurent de Rocheur presiding, and Gabriel Godfrey Sr., born 1758, died 1833, as foreman of the jury. Hutro stood mute and silent and offered no defense. On September 10, 1820, Hutro was found guilty of the crime. The court documents make no mention of the sentence and or the fine leveled against Hutro. The bill of court costs and fees, September 10, 1820, totaled $20.37, which consisted of $3.50 for the jury, $3.50 for court fees, $4.62.50 justice fee, $2.49.50 clerk and sheriff fees, $1.50 jury cost, and 40 cents miscellaneous clerk fee. The 1840 U.S. decennial census shows Hutro present. He probably died between 1840 and 1850, since he does not appear on the 1850 U.S. decennial census, and was buried on the farm near Cedar Creek in Oregon, Ohio. Slides 23 through 25 present the selected references for this video presentation.